Champagne can make a lie sparkle, but it cannot make it clean. Clara Whitman heard the sentence in her mother's voice before she ever saw the envelope. The Evelyn Rose glided over Newport Harbor under a sky the color of polished steel, its decks glowing with crystal light, white roses, and trays of champagne that never seemed to empty. 200 guests had come aboard for Nathaniel Pierce's annual charity gala, the kind of night where kindness wore diamonds, speeches came printed on thick paper, and every camera knew which direction to face. Nathaniel stood near the grand staircase in an ivory blazer, 48 years old, white, handsome in the controlled way of men who had been photographed too often. His silver hair was brushed back, his smile practiced, his hand resting lightly on a champagne flute as donors praised the new medical access fund he was about to announce. Clara moved through the crowd in a white blouse and black apron, her brown hair tied with a wine-red ribbon, a silver tray balanced in one hand. She was 30, white, quiet, and nearly invisible in the way good service is often expected to be. People took glasses from her tray without meeting her eyes. They spoke over her shoulder about foundations, legacy, naming rights, and tax strategy. Clara did not resent their voices. She listened to them. She had always listened. She remembered faces, handwriting, small pauses, the way a person touched a document before hiding it. Her mother used to say memory was a form of witness, especially for people no one invited to the table. Near the center of the main salon, beneath a glass case filled with old photographs and thank you letters, the Pierce Foundation had arranged a display called 20 Years of Mercy. Clara had passed it 3 times already without stopping. A photo of Nathaniel shaking hands outside a clinic. A copy of an oversized check. A newspaper clipping about a community health initiative. A yellowed envelope tucked behind a ribbon stack of letters, placed slightly crooked, as if someone had added it late and hoped no one would notice. Clara noticed. Her fingers slowed on the stem of a champagne flute. The handwriting on the envelope leaned to the right, soft at the loops, firm at the endings. She knew that hand. She had seen it on grocery lists, birthday cards, overdue notices, and notes left on the kitchen table before 12-hour nursing shifts. Her mother's handwriting. The room tilted without moving. Around her, laughter rose like bubbles. Nathaniel stepped toward the microphone while Victor Hale, his private attorney, adjusted the speech cards and whispered near his ear. "Keep it warm. Keep it personal." Clara stared at the envelope. Harbor Light Clinic, written in blue ink. Her throat tightened, but her face stayed still. Harbor Light had been the clinic where her mother volunteered after hospital shifts, the place that treated people who could not wait 6 weeks for an appointment or pay $200 before being seen. The official story, the one printed on plaques and gala brochures, said Nathaniel Pierce saved Harbor Light with a generous foundation grant. Clara had grown up believing the grant came too late to save anything. Her mother had never known why. Nathaniel raised his glass. "Tonight," he said, his voice warm enough for cameras, "we honor the belief that compassion must never be delayed." The guest smiled. Clara looked at the old envelope in the glass case and felt the air leave the room, even though no one else had stopped breathing. Clara Whitman kept moving because stillness would have drawn attention. She lifted empty glasses from a marble side table, replaced them with full ones, and let the rhythm of service carry her body while her mind stayed locked on the yellowed envelope inside the glass case. Harbor Light Clinic. Her mother's handwriting. Nathaniel Pierce's voice floated over the salon, smooth and practiced, telling the guests that compassion was not a slogan, but a responsibility. People nodded as if they had been handed something sacred. Clara knew the sound of a room agreeing with itself. It had a softness to it, a comfort, a refusal to ask who had paid for the beauty of the story. Her mother, Elaine Whitman, had not moved through rooms like this. She had worn soft-soled nursing shoes from discount stores and carried granola bars in her purse for patients who came in dizzy from skipping meals. She had worked at the hospital during the day and volunteered at Harbor Light 3 evenings a week because she believed a neighborhood clinic could keep a person from becoming a tragedy. Clara remembered waiting in the clinic office at 9 years old, doing homework beside a humming vending machine, while her mother translated prescription instructions for elderly patients and helped mothers fill out insurance forms they did not understand. Harbor Light had smelled like hand soap, old carpet, coffee, and winter coats drying near the radiator. It was not glamorous. It was necessary. Then came the year of letters. Clara remembered her mother writing them after midnight at the kitchen table, blue pen in hand, asking donors and foundations to release promised funds before the clinic missed another rent payment. One letter had been addressed to Pierce Foundation. Clara had licked the stamp herself. Her mother had pressed the envelope flat with both palms before placing it in the mailbox, as if hope needed a steady hand. Weeks passed. No answer came. The clinic closed in February, during a cold snap that made the apartment windows frost at the edges. Months later, a newspaper photo showed Nathaniel Pierce outside the empty building with a giant check and a headline about renewal. By then, Harbor Light was gone, its staff scattered, its patients redirected to waiting lists and bus rides across town. Clara had been too young to understand the shape of the lie, but old enough to remember her mother's face when she folded the newspaper and put it under the sink with the recycling. Nathaniel continued speaking. We do not build legacy by waiting for perfect moments. We build it by answering need when it calls. Clara nearly dropped the glass in her hand. Victor Hale stood near the microphone, watching the room more than the speech. His black suit was immaculate, his expression calm in the way locked doors are calm. When Clara moved closer to the display case, Victor's eyes found her. Noticed the tray. Noticed her stare. He stepped toward her before she reached the velvet rope. Staff should remain behind the service line, he said quietly. Clara looked at him. That envelope does not belong in this display. Victor's smile did not change. The Foundation archive team approved every item. The handwriting belongs to my mother. For the first time, something small shifted in his face. Not shock. Recognition. That was worse. Then your mother must have been part of a meaningful chapter, he said. Clara felt the old kitchen light in her memory. The blue pen, the stamp, the newspaper under the sink. No, she said softly. She was part of the chapter you erased. Victor Hale did not answer Clara at once. He looked past her first, toward Nathaniel Pierce, who was still speaking under the crystal lights with a champagne flute raised beside a microphone. That glance told Clara more than denial could have. Victor was not confused. He was calculating distance. Distance from the glass case to the stage. Distance from the waitress to the cameras. Distance from an old envelope to a polished legacy. Miss, he said, keeping his voice low, this is a private event. If you have a personal concern, you may send a written inquiry to the Foundation office. Clara almost smiled at the careful insult of it. A written inquiry. Her mother had sent one. It was sitting behind glass, yellowed and useful only because someone had mistaken it for decoration. I am not here with a concern, Clara said. I am here with a memory. Victor's eyes narrowed. Memories are not records. Sometimes they are the only records poor people are allowed to keep. The sentence remained quiet, but it changed the air between them. Victor stepped slightly closer, blocking her view of the display. Return to service. Clara lifted her tray. Not in surrender. In patience. She had worked enough rooms like this to understand timing. Rich people did not fear truth when it was spoken near the kitchen doors. They feared it when it reached the microphone. Nathaniel's speech moved into its warmest section. He spoke of his childhood visits to Newport, of seeing need up close, of promising himself that one day he would use success as a bridge. The guests listened with softened faces. A woman in diamonds touched her husband's sleeve. A young reporter lifted her phone to record. Clara turned away from Victor and walked toward the service station, where an older man in a navy jacket was checking the table cards. His badge read Andrew Bell, Foundation archive consultant. She had seen him earlier adjusting the glass case with white cotton gloves. His hands trembled slightly when he worked, not from age alone, but from care. Clara stopped beside him. Mr. Bell, she said. The yellow envelope in the Harbor Light display. Did you include it? Andrew looked up, startled by being addressed by name. Yes. It was in the Foundation's old storage box. No one had cataloged it. I thought it belonged with the clinic materials. Did you make a scan? His face changed. Archivists understand that question the way sailors understand weather. Of every item. Clara glanced toward Victor, who was now watching them. I need to see it. Andrew hesitated. I am not sure I am permitted to share Foundation property. Clara's voice softened. My mother wrote that letter. The old man looked toward the glass case, then back at Clara. The room was applauding now. Nathaniel had just said something about the dignity of care. Andrew reached into his leather folder and removed a tablet. His thumb moved through labeled files until he found the scan. Harbor Light Clinic Correspondence, 2008. He turned the screen slightly, shielding it with his body. Clara saw the full page for the first time in 16 years. Dear Pierce Foundation, my name is Elaine Whitman, registered nurse and volunteer coordinator at Harbor Light Clinic. She stopped breathing for a second, then forced herself to continue. The words were clearer than memory and harder than grief. The promised grant has not arrived. We have delayed utility payments twice. Our pediatric medication fund is nearly empty. Please do not let timing become another word for letting poor people disappear. Clara touched nothing. She did not need to. The sentence entered her like a door opening in a house she thought had been demolished. Behind her, Victor's voice sharpened. Mr. Bell, that file is not approved for guest display. Andrew closed the tablet halfway, but not before Clara saw the final line. If the foundation cannot help us in time, please at least tell us the truth, so we can stop giving our patients hope we cannot protect. Nathaniel's applause faded. Clara turned toward the stage. He stood smiling beneath the lights, holding a speech about compassion while her mother's unanswered plea glowed in a tablet behind the bar. Graceful lies were still lies. And for the first time that night, Clara knew exactly where to place the truth. Clara did not rush toward the microphone. That would have given Victor Hale the scene he wanted, a waitress stepping out of line, a private memory dressed as public disruption, a reason to remove her before anyone understood why she had moved at all. Instead, she did what her mother had taught her in crowded clinic rooms. She worked calmly while the urgent thing waited in her hands. Andrew Bell made one copy from the archive scan with a portable printer tucked beneath the display table, his fingers moving with quiet guilt. He did not ask whether he should. He only whispered, "Your mother deserved a better catalog than this." Clara took the page and folded it once inside a white linen napkin. The paper felt thin, too thin for the years it had carried. Across the salon, Nathaniel Pierce stepped down from the small stage to greet donors before the final announcement. Cameras followed him. Champagne rose in golden lines. Victor moved with him, always half a step behind, smoothing the path before questions could form. Clara lifted a fresh tray and entered the current of guests. A man in a navy tuxedo took a glass without looking at her. A woman asked if the champagne was French. Clara answered politely. Her heart beat slowly, not because she was calm, but because grief sometimes becomes precise when it has waited long enough. Nathaniel reached the central table where the final pledge card lay beneath the foundation seal. Victor placed the speech folder beside it and leaned close. After this, we announced the Harbor Light Legacy Wing, he murmured. Clara heard every word. Harbor Light. Legacy. Wing. The old clinic's name polished into a new donor wall, while the woman who had tried to save it remained trapped in a forgotten letter. Clara stepped forward and set a champagne flute beside Nathaniel's hand. Then she placed the folded white napkin next to it. Not on top of his speech, not in front of the cameras. Beside his glass, where only he would see it first. Nathaniel glanced at her, distracted. Thank you. Clara did not move away. That belongs with your speech, sir. Victor looked down at once. His face tightened before Nathaniel even opened the napkin. Mr. Pierce, not now. That was the mistake. Nathaniel heard fear in the command. He unfolded the linen. The copied letter lay beneath the lights in his own foundation's archival format. Elaine Whitman's name appeared at the top. Harbor Light Clinic. 2008. His hand stopped over the page. Clara watched the exact moment recognition reached him, not as memory, but as shame. It did not come loudly. It took the color from his face one shade at a time. Where did you get this? Victor asked. Clara kept her eyes on Nathaniel. From your history. Nathaniel read the first lines. Then the line about timing. Then the line about patients being given hope they could not protect. The smile he had worn for 2 hours disappeared so completely that the guests nearest the table began to quiet. One camera lowered. Victor reached for the paper, but Nathaniel moved it away without looking at him. That small motion changed everything. This was reviewed years ago, Victor said quickly. It was part of a complicated funding sequence. Clara's voice stayed low. My mother called it waiting. Nathaniel looked up at her then. For the first time that night, he seemed to see her not as service, not as an interruption, but as someone standing where his past had finally arrived. Elaine Whitman was your mother? He asked. Clara nodded. She wrote that letter after midnight at our kitchen table. I licked the stamp. She waited by the phone for 3 weeks. The guests around them had stopped speaking. The yacht still glittered. The champagne still shone. But the room had lost its appetite for sparkle. Victor stepped between Clara and Nathaniel, his voice still polished, but tighter now. "Mr. Pierce, this is an emotional misunderstanding." Clara looked at him. "No. An emotional misunderstanding is when someone forgets a birthday." This was a clinic asking for promised money while people still had time. Nathaniel's fingers bent the speech card beneath his other hand. He looked toward the glass case, the oversized check, the old photograph of himself outside Harbor Light, smiling in front of a building that had already failed. Clara saw the truth reach him in layers. The delay, the photo, the applause that came after the doors were closed. Victor leaned closer. "Do not let this derail the evening." Nathaniel stared at the letter. "What evening?" he said softly. And the silence that followed was the first honest thing the yacht had served all night. Nathaniel Pierce's question did not sound like resistance. It sounded like a man hearing his own celebration from a great distance and no longer recognizing the music. "What evening?" The words remained between the champagne flutes and the folded letter, small enough for only the nearest guests to hear, but strong enough to stop the room from pretending. Victor Hale recovered first because men like Victor made a career of recovering before truth could settle. He placed one hand near Nathaniel's elbow, not touching him, only guiding the space around him. "We should step into the study," he said. "This deserves privacy." Clara Whitman looked at the glass case, at the old envelope, at the oversized check, at the smiling photograph that had borrowed dignity from a clinic already gone. "Privacy is how it stayed hidden," she said. The nearby guests turned fully now. A reporter lowered her phone, then lifted it again with a different kind of attention. Nathaniel did not tell her to stop. He read the letter a second time. Clara could see his eyes catching on the line her mother had written with the kind of exhaustion only working people understand. "Please do not let timing become another word for letting poor people disappear." His fingers tightened against the page. "I remember Harbor Light," he said slowly. Victor's jaw shifted. "You remember the public face, the reopening initiative?" "No," Nathaniel said. "I remember the delay. The admission did not arrive as a confession yet. It arrived as a crack." Clara held herself still. She had waited 16 years without knowing she was waiting. She could wait one more minute for him to choose the right word. Victor leaned closer, voice soft and sharp. "Careful. Historical funding timelines are complex." Nathaniel looked at him then. "Did we receive this letter before the building closed?" Victor's face became perfectly neutral. "The foundation received many letters. Did we receive this one before the building closed?" The second question was quieter. That made it harder to escape. Victor glanced at the guests, the camera, Andrew Bell standing pale near the display table, Clara in her white blouse and black apron with the wine-red ribbon still neat in her hair. "Yes," he said finally. The word moved across the table like a dropped glass that somehow made no sound. Nathaniel looked down. Clara thought of her mother waiting beside their kitchen phone, reheating coffee, checking the mail after long shifts, saying maybe tomorrow without letting Clara hear the doubt underneath. "And the grant?" Nathaniel asked. Victor exhaled through his nose. "It was held pending acquisition terms around the adjacent lots. You know that." Nathaniel closed his eyes. "Not long. Long enough for the old story to lose its costume." Harbor Light had not been saved by generosity. It had been used by negotiation. The money had waited because waiting made property cheaper, headlines cleaner, leverage stronger. When the clinic closed, the foundation came in later with cameras and checks, and words like renewal. Clara's mother had written before the doors shut. Nathaniel had answered after the photograph could belong to him. "My mother died believing no one read her letter," Clara said. Her voice did not shake. That was what made it unbearable. She thought maybe she had addressed it wrong. Maybe the stamp came loose. Maybe the mail lost it. She blamed everything except the people who made her wait. Nathaniel opened his eyes. The room was silent enough for the harbor water to be heard against the hull. Victor spoke again, thinner now. "Mr. Pierce, context matters." Clara turned to him. "So does timing." That was the point. Nathaniel placed the letter flat on the table beside the untouched champagne. The bubbles kept rising, bright and useless. He looked toward the microphone where his final pledge announcement waited. Then he looked at Clara, and for the first time, there was no speech between them. "What was her name again?" he asked. Clara's chin lifted. "Elaine Whitman." Nathaniel repeated it softly. Elaine Whitman. Not for the guests. Not for the cameras. For memory. Victor reached for the speech folder, but Nathaniel put his palm over it. No, he said. Not that one. Nathaniel Pierce walked toward the microphone without the speech Victor Hale had prepared. The movement was small, only 20 feet across the main salon, but every person on the Evelyn Rose felt the distance change beneath him. The gala had been designed for applause. The stage lights had been angled to soften his face. The donor wall behind him carried names in silver lettering, each one polished into importance. The champagne still moved in the flutes, bright and careless, but no one lifted a glass. Clara Whitman stayed beside the central table, her hands folded in front of her black apron, the copied letter lying near Nathaniel's untouched drink. She did not follow him. She did not need to. The truth had already reached the microphone before he did. Victor stepped close, speaking through a smile that had lost its warmth. Nathaniel, pause for 1 minute. We can verify language. We can acknowledge a historical delay without assigning intent. Nathaniel stopped and looked at him. That is what we did the first time. Victor's face tightened. We protected the foundation. No, Nathaniel said. We protected me. The words were not loud, but the nearest camera caught them. So did the guests. So did Andrew Bell, standing beside the glass case with his cotton gloves still in one hand. Nathaniel reached the microphone and placed both palms on the lectern. For a moment, he looked at the prepared lights, the donors, the foundation board, the framed photographs, and the woman in a waitress uniform whose mother had written him before everything beautiful about tonight became possible. He had spent years speaking smoothly about service. Now the first honest sentence had to arrive without polish. I was going to announce a new wing tonight, he said. I was going to tell you that generosity built it. A soft movement passed through the room. A purse clasp closing. A chair shifting. Someone swallowing. Nathaniel looked down at the letter in Clara's hand, not at his speech cards. 16 years ago, Harbor Light Clinic asked the Pierce Foundation to release funds we had already committed. The clinic was struggling. People depended on it. A nurse named Elaine Whitman wrote to us before the doors closed. Clara's face remained still, but her thumb pressed once against her palm. Her mother's name sounded different under crystal lights. Not saved. Not erased. Spoken. Nathaniel continued. We received the letter. We delayed the funding because there were property negotiations around the adjacent lots. We called it timing. We called it strategy. We allowed a clinic to fail, then used a later donation to build a story in which we appeared compassionate. Victor closed his eyes briefly. The reporter's phone stayed raised. No one interrupted. Nathaniel's voice thinned, then steadied. That was not compassion. That was ownership of a tragedy we did not prevent. The sentence changed the room more than any check could have. Clara saw one of the older donors look away from the Harbor Light photograph. She saw Andrew Bell lower his head. She saw a young server near the doors stop, pretending not to listen. Nathaniel turned slightly toward the glass case. The display behind me is incomplete. It honors the check, the photograph, and the announcement. It does not honor the people who served patients before our cameras arrived. It does not honor the letters we ignored. It does not honor Elaine Whitman. Victor moved as if to approach the stage, but Nathaniel lifted one hand without looking at him. Not a command. A boundary. The fund announced tonight will not carry my name, Nathaniel said. It will be placed under independent community governance. The old Harbor Light records will be opened for review. Any public material that credits me with saving that clinic will be corrected. A quiet shock moved through the donors. The kind that sounds like silken breath. Clara looked at the champagne tower near the wall. Glass above glass, shining and fragile. Her mother would have hated the waste, then quietly asked whether the servers had eaten. Nathaniel looked directly at Clara. Miss Whitman, he said, and the formality did not feel dismissive now. I cannot give your mother back the answer she deserved. Clara held his gaze. No, she said softly, though the microphone caught none of it. Nathaniel nodded as if he had heard anyway. But I can stop using her silence as part of my reputation. The yacht remained still beneath them, full of champagne no one wanted to drink, full of wealthy people facing a truth that had arrived in a folded napkin. Clara did not smile. Justice, when it finally enters a room, does not always feel like victory. Sometimes it feels like a name being returned to its rightful place. The silence after Nathaniel Pierce's confession did not break all at once. It loosened in small human sounds. A chair leg shifted against the polished floor. A guest set down a glass too carefully. Someone near the back whispered the name Elaine Whitman, as if testing whether it had always belonged in the room. Clara stood beside the central table and felt no triumph. The yacht still shone. The champagne still caught the light. The harbor still moved beyond the windows with the same calm it had carried before the truth arrived. But something had been taken from the evening that could not be poured back into place. Victor Hale stepped toward the microphone, his face composed into concern. "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Pierce has chosen transparency, and we will provide a formal statement after internal review." Nathaniel turned from the lectern. "No," Victor paused. "Nathaniel, no formal statement before the records are opened." The word landed softly, but it closed a door. Nathaniel looked toward Andrew Bell near the display case. "Mr. Bell, can you preserve the original materials tonight?" Andrew straightened, still holding his cotton gloves. "Yes, sir. The archive box, scans, chain of custody, everything. Do it under independent supervision." Victor's expression cooled. "That is unnecessary." Nathaniel looked at him with a grief that had finally become clarity. "You told me that once before." Clara lowered her eyes to the letter. Her mother's words lay flat under the lights, no longer begging through the mail, no longer trapped behind a foundation display. Elaine Whitman had not wanted a stage. She had wanted medicine, rent, one more month for a clinic that served people with nowhere else to go. Clara wondered whether justice could ever arrive early enough for the dead. Maybe not. Maybe it could only arrive in time to stop the next erasure. Nathaniel stepped down from the stage and approached her, stopping far enough away that she did not have to step back. His ivory blazer looked less immaculate now, one sleeve creased where he had gripped the lectern. "Miss Whitman," he said, "I am sorry." Clara looked at him. For years, she had imagined apologies as large things, warm things, things that might repair a kitchen table where her mother once sat exhausted under yellow light. This one was small. It had to be. "You are sorry because you saw the letter," she said. "My mother was sorry because she saw the waiting room." Nathaniel took that without defense. The guests closest to them heard it and became still again. Victor tried one last time from behind him. "Mr. Pierce, the optics of continuing this conversation publicly are complicated." Clara did not look at Victor. Nathaniel did. The optics were the problem. Then he turned to the foundation board seated along the right side of the salon. "Every reference to Harbor Light as a Pierce rescue will be removed. The new health fund will be named after the clinic staff and volunteers, not after me. The first seat on the community advisory board goes to a former Harbor Light worker or family representative, if they are willing." The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Nathaniel did not soften it for them. "If anyone objects, say it now without champagne in your hand." No one spoke. Clara thought of her mother laughing tiredly at the sink, saying rich people loved helping as long as help could arrive with ribbon around it. The memory hurt, but it no longer felt buried. Andrew unlocked the display case with careful hands. The old envelope came out first. Yellowed paper, blue ink, a corner bent by years of being stored by people who had not understood it was a wound. He carried it to Clara. "Would you like to hold it?" he asked. Clara stared at the envelope. She wanted to. She did not. Both feelings were true. "Not yet," she said. "Put it where everyone can read what it is." Andrew nodded and placed it upright beside the copied letter, not as decoration, but as evidence. Nathaniel watched this, and the shame on his face changed shape. It stopped being private. It became responsibility. Outside, the yacht's lights shimmered across Newport Harbor, bright and beautiful and suddenly insufficient. Clara picked up her tray because the old habit returned when her heart had nowhere to rest. Nathaniel noticed, but this time he did not ask her to stay for his comfort. He only said, "Your mother will not be left out of the story again." Clara held the tray against her side, the wine-red ribbon at the back of her hair dark against her white blouse. "Do not make her the story," she said. "Make her the reason you stop editing everyone else out." Nathaniel bowed his head once. The room heard the quiet command inside her words. And for the first time that night, the most powerful person on the yacht was not the man with the microphone, but the woman who had never needed one. By the time the Evelyn Rose turned back toward the marina, the charity gala had become something no one could package neatly. The band did not resume. The champagne tower remained untouched near the wall, bright and useless under the crystal lights. Guests moved through the salon in quiet clusters, speaking in lowered voices, no longer sure whether they had attended a celebration or witnessed the opening of a sealed room. Victor Hale stood near the stern windows with two Foundation board members, trying to build language out of what Nathaniel Pierce had refused to hide. "We will need a transitional message," Victor said. "We can protect the fund while acknowledging complexity." Nathaniel heard him from across the room and turned. His ivory blazer was still elegant, but the man inside it looked altered, less polished, and more awake. "No," he said. "No complexity where the record is plain." Victor's mouth tightened. "The record is never plain." Clara Whitman stood near the service station, folding and used linen napkins with hands that moved from habit more than duty. She looked at the glass case where Andrew Bell had placed the envelope upright beside the copied letter. Her mother's handwriting faced the room now, not hidden behind ribbon, not softened into legacy, just present. Nathaniel walked to the Foundation board and set his speech cards on the table. "Tomorrow morning, the Pierce Foundation will release the Harbor Light documents to an independent community review panel. The new health fund will be removed from my personal branding. Its first grants will go to clinics that are still open, still waiting, and still serving people before the cameras arrive." One board member, a woman in a pearl gray dress, asked carefully, "And the gala donors?" Nathaniel looked at the untouched champagne, then at Clara. "They can decide whether they came for my name or for the work." The sentence was not grand. It was almost tired. That made Clara believe it more. Victor stepped closer to Nathaniel, lowering his voice, but not enough. "You are turning a controlled asset into a public liability." Nathaniel looked at him for a long moment. "You helped me make mercy into an asset." Victor said nothing. The yacht moved gently through the harbor, passing dark docks and sleeping boats. Clara remembered walking home with her mother after late clinic nights, the two of them sharing one pair of gloves because Elaine always gave hers to someone colder. Her mother had never asked to be honored. She had asked for electricity to stay on, medicine shelves to stay filled, and patients to stop apologizing for needing help. Clara picked up the folded apron she had placed beneath the bar and untied it slowly. The shift was not over, but her part in the lie was. Nathaniel noticed from across the room. He approached, stopping where the service line met the guest floor, a boundary that had felt invisible until tonight made it visible. "Clara," he said, using her first name only after she looked at him. "I would like you to stay involved with the review, if you are willing. Not for publicity, not for a photograph, for accuracy." Clara studied his face. She saw shame there, but shame alone could be selfish. She looked for something harder to perform. "Patience. Accuracy starts with people you never invited onto this yacht," she said. "Former patients, old nurses, receptionists, janitors, families who waited in that clinic when the grant did not come." Nathaniel nodded. "Then they will be invited first." Victor gave a quiet, disbelieving laugh. "This is not governance. This is penance." Clara turned to him at last. Her calmness made him look smaller than anger would have. Maybe governance should have had more penance in it. The nearest board member looked down. Nathaniel did not defend Victor. That mattered. The yacht reached the dock just before dawn, and the crew prepared the gangway without the usual farewell music. Guests left carefully, some avoiding the display, others stopping to read the letter before stepping into the morning. Clara waited until the salon was nearly empty. Then she walked to the glass case. Andrew stood beside it. "Do you want the original returned to the family?" he asked. Clara looked at the envelope. For 16 years, it had belonged to silence. Now it belonged to the record. "Not yet," she said. "Let people read what she asked for." Andrew nodded. Nathaniel stood a few feet away, quiet enough not to interrupt grief he had not earned the right to comfort. Clara turned toward the gangway, the wine-red ribbon in her hair dark against the pale light. Nathaniel spoke once more. "What should the fund be called?" She paused. Outside, Newport Harbor was waking slowly, gulls moving over the water, dock lines creaking in the cold air. "Not after my mother," she said. "She would hate that." A faint sadness touched her mouth. "Call it Harbor Light. And this time, make sure the light reaches people before they disappear." Then Clara stepped off the yacht, not carrying a trophy, not carrying a check, only leaving behind a name that could no longer be edited out. 3 months later, the old Harbor Light building opened its doors again, not as a monument to Nathaniel Pierce, not as a polished photograph for a Foundation brochure, but as a working clinic with fresh paint, repaired floors, and a waiting room full of ordinary chairs. The sign outside was simple: Harbor Light Community Health Center. No billionaire name above it. No silver plaque large enough to turn compassion into ownership. On the first morning, a grandmother came in with a prescription question, a young father asked about vaccination records, and a college student filled out a form with the careful embarrassment of someone hoping the visit would not cost more than rent. Behind the front desk, former nurses, new volunteers, and community board members moved with the calm urgency of people doing work that mattered before anyone praised it. Clara Whitman stood near the side wall in a white blouse and dark slacks, her brown hair tied with the same wine-red ribbon. She had not planned to stay long. She had told herself she was only there to see whether the promise had become more than a speech. But when she stepped inside and smelled coffee, hand soap, winter coats, and printer paper, memory found her so sharply that she had to rest one hand against the wall. It was not the same clinic. It could never be the same. But something in the air had returned. At the far end of the room, a framed display held the old yellow envelope, a copy of Elaine Whitman's letter, and a plain note explaining the delayed grant without excuses. The display was not decorated with champagne photos. It did not call Nathaniel a savior. It named the staff, volunteers, patients, and neighbors who had kept Harbor Light alive for as long as they could. Clara read her mother's sentence again. Please do not let timing become another word for letting poor people disappear. This time, no glass case hit it on a yacht. People could stand close enough to understand. Nathaniel arrived quietly through the side entrance, wearing an ivory blazer but no entourage. His hair was neatly brushed back, his face older in the honest way shame can age a man when he lets it become responsibility instead of performance. Victor Hale was no longer counsel for the foundation. The old board had been replaced by community members, clinic workers, and former patients. The Harbor Light Fund had released its first grants to 3 clinics before announcing anything to the press. Clara had checked. So had others. Trust, she had learned, was not a feeling. It was paperwork, timing, access, and who held the keys after the cameras left. Nathaniel stopped several feet from her, careful not to make the moment about him. The first reports are public, he said. Every grant timeline, every denial, every delay. Clara kept her eyes on the letter. And when it makes the foundation look bad, especially then. She turned to him. There was no grandeur in his answer. That helped. My mother would have asked whether the waiting room had enough chairs, Clara said. Nathaniel looked across the room. A volunteer was unfolding more near the corner. We ordered 40 more. They arrive tomorrow. For the first time, Clara almost smiled. Not because the past had been fixed. It had not. Her mother had still waited by a phone that did not ring. Harbor Light had still closed when it was needed. Patients had still been sent elsewhere, while wealthy men negotiated timing. But the lie no longer had the final word. Near the entrance, a young nurse read the display and whispered Elaine's name to another volunteer. Clara heard it. The sound moved through her gently, like a hand smoothing a wrinkled page. Nathaniel heard it too. His eyes lowered, not from embarrassment alone, but from recognition. Names are not small things. They are the places where truth comes back to stand. Later that morning, a reporter arrived and asked Clara whether she wanted to be photographed beside Nathaniel. Clara declined. She walked instead to the coffee station, poured 2 cups for the front desk volunteers, and asked where extra intake forms were kept. Work was better than posing. Her mother would have understood. Nathaniel watched from across the room, but did not interrupt. He had learned, finally, that respect sometimes meant staying silent while other people carried the center of the story. Outside, sunlight touched the clinic windows and moved across the sidewalk where patients waited for the doors to open wider. There was no yacht beneath Clara's feet now. No champagne. No crystal lights. Only a room full of people who needed help before their suffering became useful to someone else's legacy. Clara placed a stack of forms on the front desk, then looked once more at her mother's letter. Champagne could toast a lie, but it could not wash away the names of those who carried the truth. And in that quiet clinic, the truth no longer had to whisper.